The rain poured down on the busy alien marketplace. It was cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling too. Hundreds of people walked past Talians of every kind. Their footsteps echoed on the metal ground, splashing in dirty puddles. Neon lights buzzed above them, blinking in different languages, offering food, clothes, tech, and pleasure. But no one looked at her. She stood alone, barefoot on the cold metal floor. Her small body was wrapped in nothing but a thin, torn cloth. Her skin, pale lavender, was covered in bruises and dirt. She was shaking, not just from the cold, but from hunger, fear, and shame. Her long hair was wet and stuck to her face, hiding her eyes, yet she looked up at everyone who passed, whispering the same words again and again. "All I have are my clothes. Please, I'll do anything for food." Most didn't hear her. Some looked away in disgust. A few laughed or made cruel comments. She didn't cry anymore. There were no tears left to fall. She had already given up many things. Her pride, her body, her hope. But now she feared she would give up her life too. She tried once more, stepping in front of a tall alien merchant. "Please, just some food," she whispered. He pushed her to the ground. "You're filth." He growled and walked away. She didn't move, just laid there on the cold, wet floor. People stepped around her as if she was trash. She closed her eyes, ready to let go. Then she felt something warm. A jacket, soft, dry, and human-made, was placed over her shoulders. A hand, firm but gentle, touched her arm. "Are you okay?" A voice asked. It was male, deep, and different. Not angry, not cruel. It was worried. She looked up slowly, through wet lashes and hair. She saw a face she'd never seen before. It was not alien, it was human. He had short brown hair, tired eyes, and a strong jaw. He looked like a worker, not rich, not powerful. But he was kneeling in the rain just for her. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have one. Instead, she said what she always said. "All I have are my clothes." Then she added, "I don't want to die." His face hardened with anger, not at her, but at the world around them. He stood up and took off his backpack. From it, he pulled a small food box and handed it to her. It was warm, steaming, filled with real protein and soft bread. She stared at it as if it was gold, but she didn't reach for it. "It's okay," he said gently. "Eat still." She hesitated. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why are you helping me?" The man looked around. People were still passing by, still ignoring her. "Because no one else is," he said. "Because someone should." She finally took the box with both hands. Her fingers were trembling as she brought a piece of bread to her mouth. As soon as she tasted it, her body reacted. She ate fast, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Tears rolled down her face as she chewed. Not because of the food, but because someone finally saw her. "My name's Caleb," the man said. "I'm a mechanic, just visiting this market to buy parts." She nodded, her mouth full, unable to speak, but her eyes locked on him. Watching every move, she was trying to understand if he was real. Caleb took off his outer shirt and used it to wipe her face. "Let's get you out of the rain," he said. She didn't move. "Do you trust me?" he asked, offering his hand. She hesitated, then slowly. She nodded. She took his hand. It was the first time in her life that someone touched her without pain as they walked through the crowd. People stared, some laughed, some whispered, but Caleb didn't care. He walked with his head high, holding her like she mattered, like she was human. He didn't know her story yet. Kay didn't know where she came from, but he knew this. She had nothing, not even a name, but now she had him, and for the first time in her life, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to live. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy over the alien city. Caleb walked quickly through the narrow metal streets, holding the girl close under his arm. Her thin body shook against him. Not from cold anymore, but from fear. Every time someone looked at her, she flinched. Every shout or sudden sound made her eyes go wide, like she was ready to run or hide. Caleb didn't speak much. He didn't know what to say. But he knew one thing: he couldn't just leave her out there again. She needed food, clothes, and safety. And maybe more than anything, she needed someone who didn't see her as garbage. He brought her to a nearby food stall. The smell of roasted meat and spices filled the air. "Hey, one plate, please," Caleb said, pointing at the grill. The vendor, a large, four-armed alien, frowned and looked at the girl beside him. Then his lip curled in disgust. "Not for that," the vendor said, waving them away. "She's street scum. Pleasure bread. No ID. Not allowed." Caleb's jaw clenched. "She's hungry, and I'm paying." "Doesn't matter," the vendor growled. "She brings trouble. Go somewhere else." Caleb stared at him, fists tight. He looked down at the girl. Her head was lowered, her arms wrapped around herself again. She was used to this. This was normal for her. But that made Caleb's chest hurt even more. He turned, guiding her away. They walked until they found a small corner store run by a quiet insectoid female. This time, Caleb didn't ask. He bought sealed food packs, protein bars, and even a water pouch. The girl didn't say anything. She just stared at the items in his hand like she was dreaming again. Back at his workshop, small but clean place filled with tools and ship parts, he finally let her sit down. She sat on the floor, legs tucked close, watching him with wide eyes. "Eat," Caleb said. Placing the food gently in front of her, she looked around the room first, like she was waiting for someone to yell or hit her when nothing happened. She slowly began to eat. After a while, Caleb asked, "Do you have a name?" She shook her head. "Did someone ever call you anything?" She paused, then whispered, "Thing. Or number." Caleb swallowed hard. No one should grow up like that, not even on the rough edges of the galaxy. She didn't ask many questions. Instead, she watched him work as he cleaned parts or fixed wiring. Her eyes followed every motion. It was like she was trying to learn. Not just what he was doing, but who he was. Later that night, Caleb found an old blanket and gently handed it to her. She clutched it tightly, curling up in a corner of the room like a scared animal. He wanted to tell her it was okay to use the bed, but he didn't want to scare her again. Instead, he sat nearby, reading a repair manual for a long time. Neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, "Why?" Caleb looked up. "Why what? Why are you helping me?" He put the book down and thought for a moment. "Because no one else did," he said quietly. "Because you didn't deserve what happened to you." She didn't reply, but for the first time, she didn't look away either. The next morning, Caleb took her to a small clothing stall in a safer part of the city. The vendor was an old woman who looked at the girl with pity, not hate. "Poor thing," she said, handing Caleb some clean clothes. "These were made for orphans. Take them." He thanked her and gave the girl space to change when she stepped out. Wearing a simple shirt and pants, she looked different, still thin, still bruised, but no longer invisible. As they walked back, they passed by a group of guards. One of them stopped and looked at the girl. He narrowed his eyes. "You, where's your ID?" The girl froze, unable to speak. Caleb stepped forward. "She's with me, illegal slave." The guard asked coldly. "No, just someone I'm helping." The guard grunted and walked away, but his eyes lingered too long. Back at the workshop, the girl sat near the door, her arms wrapped around her knees. "They'll come," she said. "Who?" Caleb asked. "The ones who owned me." Caleb crouched beside her. "Not while you're with me." "But I'm not worth it," she said quietly. "You are now," he answered. And even if she didn't believe it yet, Caleb did. And he'd prove it no matter what it took. Caleb sat on the floor beside the bench, tightening a bolt on a broken engine core. Sparks flew for a second, but he didn't even flinch across the room. The alien girl sat cross-legged, quietly watching him like always. She was wearing the new clothes he had given her. They were still too big, but they made her look less like a ghost and more like someone who belonged. She hadn't spoken all morning, but her eyes never left his hands. She studied every twist of the wrench, every click of the tools. Caleb could tell she wanted to ask questions, but something kept her silent. Maybe fear, maybe shame, maybe both. After a while, he set the tool down and wiped his hands with a cloth. "Do you want to learn how this works?" he asked. She blinked, unsure, then nodded slowly. He smiled. "Come here, I'll show you." She crawled over carefully, still moving like someone afraid of sudden punishment. Caleb picked up the core and turned it so she could see the wiring. "Inside, this is a plasma converter," he explained, pointing to a small chip. "It takes energy from the ship's main reactor and turns it into power for systems like heat, light, or shields." She listened closely, her head tilted too. One side, he offered her the wrench. She took it with 2 hands, like it might break. "You won't mess it up," he said gently. "I'll guide you for the first time." She touched something with confidence. Her small fingers moved carefully, guided by his calm voice, and for the first time, she smiled, just a little. Later, as the sun set outside the dusty window, Caleb warmed 2 food packs. He gave her one and sat across from her. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a moment. She looked up, cautious. "Where did you come from?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened around the food pack. Then she whispered, "I was raised in a cage." Caleb's breath caught in a cage. She nodded, eyes looking far away. "There were many of us," she said. "We were born there, in the dark. We didn't know the sky or trees, just walls and bars." She spoke like she was reading from memory. Like her story wasn't a story, it was a nightmare she still lived in. "They fed us when we were useful," she continued. "They hit us when we made noise. When we turned old enough, they trained us. Not to think, just to please." Caleb felt something twist inside his chest. "No one ever named us. We were numbers, positions, things to rent out," she whispered. "I was number 43. He stared at her, lost for words. Her voice didn't shake, not because she was strong, but because she had cried enough already. He wanted to break something, someone. But all he could do was listen. "What happened?" he asked. "How did you get out?" She hesitated, then said, "They threw me out." "Why?" "Because I broke," she answered simply. "They said I wasn't pretty enough anymore, that I was too quiet, too slow. So they dumped me like trash outside the gates." Caleb clenched his fists. "Monsters," he muttered under his breath. She looked at him suddenly, worried. "I didn't tell you to make you angry," she said quickly. "I told you because you asked." He calmed his voice. "I'm not angry at you. I'm angry they did this to you." She looked confused for a moment. Then she asked, "Why does that matter to you?" "Because you deserve better," he said. "Much better." Silence hung between them for a while. Then she asked softly, "Do you think I'm broken?" He stood up and walked over to her, kneeling. He looked her in the eyes. "No," he said clearly. "I think you're brave, and I think you're still here. Because you're stronger than you know." Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. She reached out slowly, as if testing him, and then she gently touched his hand. It was small, cold, and shaking. But it was her first choice to reach, not to hide, and Caleb didn't pull away. That night, she slept on the cot, wrapped in the same blanket as before, but she didn't sleep curled. In a tight ball, she slept stretched out, peaceful. And Caleb watched from his workbench, a silent promise in his heart. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew this much. He would never let her go back to that cage. Not now. Not ever. The sun was just rising over the rusty rooftops of the outer district when Caleb heard the knock. It wasn't soft, it was hard, sharp, and cold. 3 knocks. Then silence. He froze where he stood. Halfway through fixing a ship panel, the girl, still half asleep on the cot, lifted her head with wide, alert eyes. Something in her face told Caleb everything. She knew that sound. He stood up and walked to the door. Wrench still in hand, he opened it halfway. 3 figures stood outside, dressed in black leather and smooth armor jackets. One was human-looking, tall with slick hair and gold teeth. The other 2 were reptilian twins with red stripes on their necks. All of them smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. "Morning, friend," the human one said. His voice sweet like poison. "Nice place you've got here." Caleb said nothing, just raised an eyebrow. "We're looking for something," the man continued, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Or should I say someone?" Caleb's grip on the wrench tightened slightly. The man gave a slow nod toward the inside of the shop. "You picked up a girl recently. Small, purple skin. No ID." "She's not yours," Caleb said coldly. "Oh, but she is," the man said, his voice turning colder. "She was registered inventory of House Vadrax, Pleasure Division, Model 43. From behind Caleb, he heard her soft gasp. She was standing now, behind the workbench, hugging herself. The reptilian twins moved slightly, as if ready to grab her at any moment. The human smiled wider. "You see, she belongs to us," he said. "Damaged or not. She's still worth something on the black market." Caleb didn't move aside. "She's not property. Not anymore." The man clicked his tongue, pretending to be disappointed. "Now listen, friend. I get it. Soft heart, rescue story. All that, but you don't want trouble, do you?" He held out a small bag. "Credits. The shiny kind. Take this. Hand her over. And we walk away like gentlemen." Caleb didn't even look at the bag. Instead, he reached forward and slammed the door in their faces. A moment of silence passed. Then came a loud bang on the door again. "You're making a big mistake, human," the man shouted. "You think she's yours now? You'll regret that." Caleb locked the door and turned around. The girl stood frozen, her hands shaking. She whispered, "They'll come back. They never stop." He walked up to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I don't care who they are," he said. "They're not taking you." But he knew this wasn't over. He needed to act fast. He had no army, no weapons. Just tools and an old shipyard. Still, he had something they didn't treason to fight. He got to work immediately. He reinforced the doors, added metal bars behind the windows. He hacked into the local security grid and set traps around the perimeter. Motion sensors, alarms, electric charges in the floor plates. She watched him the whole time. "Why do all this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Caleb didn't stop working. "I don't need to know everything," he said. "I've seen enough to know you didn't deserve what happened." That night, they sat together in silence. She looked out the window, eyes far away. "Do you think they'll hurt you for helping me?" she asked softly. "They can try," he replied, without hesitation. She reached out and touched his hand again. "But I'm not worth this," she said. "You are now," he whispered. Just after midnight, the alarm buzzed. Someone had entered the perimeter. Caleb jumped to his feet, grabbed the wrench and a shock baton. "Stay behind the bench," he told her firmly. She obeyed, crouching down, heart racing, through the window. Caleb saw the same 3 figures. This time, they were wearing dark glasses and had blasters in hand. They tried to override the door code, but it sparked back at them. One screamed, grabbing his hand. Then the floor plate shocked the second twin's boots. Still, they kept coming. Caleb waited by the door, baton ready. He could hear them cursing. Trying to break in, he took a deep breath. He wasn't a soldier, but he'd fight like one if he had to. Suddenly, a voice rang through the speaker above the door. The human one again. Last chance, mechanic. Open up and step aside. You can walk away from this. Caleb didn't answer. He just tightened his grip. And behind him, for the first time, the girl stood tall. She wasn't hiding anymore. She looked down at the weapon on the bench and picked it up. They weren't just fighting for survival now. They were fighting for something more. Freedom, dignity, and a future worth living. And they weren't giving it up without a fight. The next morning, sunlight crept through the dusty windows. But inside the workshop, everything felt cold. The girl sat near the table, knees pulled to her chest, watching Caleb as he made repairs. She hadn't touched her food, and when he spoke to her, she only nodded or gave quiet replies. Something had changed since the night before. Something deep inside her was shifting. And Caleb could feel it. She had seen him stand against men with weapons. She had seen him choose her over money. And that scared her more than anything else. He noticed her staring at the floor, silent and distant. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She forced a tiny smile and said, "Yes." But it didn't reach her eyes. That night, while Caleb was asleep at the workbench, the girl stood in the dark, fully dressed. She had wrapped her old torn cloth around her again. As if trying to erase the new life she was given, she left no sound as she walked to the door. No footsteps, no creaking. Only a small note placed near Caleb's hand, written in awkward, shaking letters, "Thank you for food and warmth. I'll survive now. Please don't come looking for me." And then she disappeared into the silent streets. Caleb woke up an hour later, confused by the empty bed. His heart dropped when he saw the note. He read it once, twice, then stood up fast. Grabbing his coat and tools, "No," he whispered. "No, not." Again, he rushed out into the morning fog, eyes searching every corner. She had no ID, no credits, no protection. She wouldn't last long out there alone, especially with those men still looking for her. He checked the alleys near the old vendors. He asked street cleaners, shopkeepers, even kids playing near trash. Heaps, some hadn't seen her. One pointed to a back alley near the garbage collection unit. "She looks scared," the kid said. 3 big guys followed her. Caleb ran, heart pounding. When he turned the corner, he saw them, 3 circling her like wolves. One grabbed her arm. Another was pulling at her cloth. She wasn't crying, she was just still. Frozen, like her soul had left her body. It was the way someone looks when they've stopped believing anyone will save them. "Hey," Caleb shouted, his voice like thunder. They turned, surprised. One of them growled, "This, your pet? Human?" Caleb didn't answer. He ran full force and slammed into the nearest thug with his shoulder. The man hit the wall hard and dropped. The second swung a pipe. But Caleb blocked it with his forearm and struck back with a wrench. The third reached for a weapon, but the girl kicked him in the knee and grabbed Caleb's tool pouch. Throwing it to him, the fight wasn't clean. Caleb was hit, bruised, bleeding from his lip. But when it ended, all 3 attackers were on the ground, groaning and unconscious. The girl stood over them, trembling. Caleb looked at her and said, "You're not leaving me like that again." She fell to her knees and buried her face in her hands. "I didn't want you to get hurt because of me," she sobbed. "I'm not worth this much pain." Caleb knelt beside her and gently lifted her face. "You are to me," he said, "and I think you just proved you're stronger than all of them." She stared at him, tears falling silently. "I thought if I left, maybe you'd be safe. But I'm not safe if I don't know you're okay," he replied. "You don't get it, do you? You're not a problem to fix. You're someone I care about now." He helped her stand. One arm around her shoulders, she leaned into him, exhausted, her legs barely steady. They walked back slowly. One step at a time, no one bothered them. Not after what had just happened back in the workshop. Caleb cleaned her scraped arms and wrapped his own bruises. The silence between them was different now, not awkward, not afraid, just full of unspoken understanding. She sat beside him, closer than ever before. And after a while, she whispered, "Can you teach me more?" Caleb looked at her with soft eyes. "About machines." She shook her head slowly. "About living. About being free." He gave a quiet smile and nodded. "That," he said, "is something we can learn together." The next morning, soft light streamed into the small workshop. Caleb sat at his workbench, fixing a cracked energy core across from him. The girl sat quietly, but this time, she wasn't curled up or hiding. She sat upright, hands resting in her lap. Watching everything with focused eyes, there was a calmness in her that hadn't been there before. And something else, to curiosity. She had stopped asking if she should leave. She had stopped looking at the door for the first time. She was beginning to believe she belonged somewhere. Caleb handed her a small tool. "This one's called a plasma liner." She turned it over in her hands, studying it like a puzzle. "What does it do?" "It helps the energy lines stay straight during repair," he said. "Without it, everything inside gets messy, like me?" She asked softly. He paused, then looked her in the eyes. "No, you're not messy. You were just hurt." She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened around the tool. She worked beside him for hours, watching, learning, even helping. At one point, she caught a wire before it sparked, saving Caleb from a nasty burn. He grinned. "Nice catch." Her lips curved into the tiniest smile. Later, as they shared lunch, Caleb looked at her and said, "You know, it feels strange calling you the girl all the time." She blinked. "That's what everyone called me before." "I'm not everyone," he said gently. "You deserve a name." She stared down at her food, unsure. "No one ever gave me one." "Then you choose," he said. "Pick one that feels right to you." She looked around the room slowly, thinking. Her eyes stopped at a small sticker on one of the toolboxes on old logo from a ship called Lyra 1. She touched the sticker with her fingertip. "Lyra?" she said quietly. "Can I be Lyra?" Caleb smiled. "It's perfect," she repeated it again, testing the word on her tongue. Lyra. It felt warm, like a blanket around her heart. It felt like hers. That evening, Caleb pulled out an old screen pad and turned it on. He loaded a simple language app and handed it to her. "If you're going to learn about the world," he said, "you'll need to read it." Lyra looked at the glowing screen, unsure at first. Then she began tracing the letters slowly with her finger. A, B, C. She looked up with wide eyes. "Is this how you learned everything?" Caleb chuckled. "Not everything, but it's a start for the next few days." They worked together like a strange little team. She helped with repairs, sorted wires, fetched tools before he could even ask, and at night she read from the pad. Whispering the words to herself like secrets, she no longer jumped at every noise. She no longer flinched when someone knocked on the door. She was still scared sometimes, but now she fought back against the fear. Then one afternoon, the alarm system beeped. A silent signal, just a small red light in the corner. Someone was nearby again. Caleb moved fast. Kana moved fast. Checking the screens, two of the same men from before were scouting the alley behind the workshop. "Kana, they're still looking for you," he said calmly. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. "They won't stop." "No," he agreed. "But we'll be ready." He gave her a small device, a shock trigger. She clipped it to her belt without a word. Together, they adjusted the locks, checked the cameras, and set more traps. But Lyra wasn't hiding this time. She was helping, planning, thinking that night. They sat by the window and watched the stars. Lyra rested her chin on her knees, looking up. "Do you think I'll ever leave this planet?" Caleb followed her gaze. "If you want to, yes." She was quiet for a long moment, then said, I used to think I'd die nameless in a cage. Now I have a name and a sky to look at." He looked at her with pride. "You're not who you used to be," he said. "You're Lyra now, and that means something." She turned to him, a flicker of light in her eyes. "Do you really think someone like me can have a real life?" Caleb leaned back and said softly, "I think someone like you can build anything, especially when they finally believe in themselves." And for the first time, Lyra believed it might be true, not because someone told her, but because she felt it deep inside. The air was heavy with tension that night. Caleb had just locked the doors again. Checking every bolt and wire, Lyra sat on the bench, hands in her lap, watching the monitor screen as red dots moved closer. They were coming back, this time, with more force, and they weren't hiding it. The criminal enforcers had called in backup, big armored men with dark gloves and stun whips. They wanted Lyra back not because they needed her, but because they couldn't accept that something they threw away had value now. She had defied them simply by surviving, and now by standing free. She was a threat to everything they believed in. "Caleb," she said softly, "I don't want you to fight for me again. It's not fair." He turned from the monitor and looked at her. "You're right," he said. "It's not fair. But neither was what they did to you. You deserve to fight too, if you choose to." She took a deep breath and nodded. "I want to fight, not just to live, but to be free." The plan was simple. Caleb would hold the front entrance while Lyra activated the traps from the workbench. If they breached the walls, she'd take the backup exit through the junkyard tunnel. But she didn't want to run not unless she had no choice. At midnight, the first door exploded. Flames and sparks shot into the sky. Caleb stood ready with his modified shock baton. They entered in pairs, silent, armored weapons raised, but they didn't expect the floor panel to collapse under them. Two fell into the pit Caleb had welded days ago, groaning in pain. Lyra watched the monitors. Heart pounding, she tapped the triggers, activating electric charges across the sidewalls. Screams echoed outside. More enemies fell, but one made it through. He was fast, brutal, and carried a blaster. He kicked open the back door and spotted her instantly. "You," he growled. "They said you'd be smarter than this." He raised the weapon. Lyra ducked just in time, rolling behind the bench. She reached for the shock trigger Caleb had given her, but it had fallen during the blast. She grabbed the closest Tula wrench hand, held it with both hands. The man stepped forward, laughing. "Really? That's your weapon?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped in fast and hit the blaster from his grip, then swung the wrench at his leg, knocking him off balance. He roared in pain, grabbing her arm. She struggled, kicked, bitter, till Caleb crashed through the smoke and tackled him from behind. The two men fought brutally. Caleb was bleeding, his arm bruised, but Lyra didn't run. She grabbed the shock trigger and stabbed it into the attacker's back. He screamed and fell unconscious, breathing heavily. Caleb sat on the ground. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes wide but steady. "You?" "I've had worse." He smiled weakly. Sirens echoed in the distance. Someone had reported the fight. Local authorities were finally coming late, but coming. They wouldn't care about the girl's past. They would only see the injuries, the damage, the attackers, and the men and girl who defended their home. When the authorities arrived, Caleb gave a full statement, and for the first time, Lyra stood beside him, not hiding, not trembling, but speaking for herself. "My name is Lyra," she said, loud and clear. "I am not property. I was hurt, but I am healing. And she pointed at Caleb. He saved me." The officers looked at each other, surprised by her voice. One of them nodded slowly and said, "You're safe now." Later that night, after the cleanup, after the questions, after the silence returned, Caleb sat at the window, bandages on his arms. Lyra stood next to him, holding 2 cups of warm broth. She handed him one and whispered, "I've never had a home before." Caleb looked at her and said, "Ah, you do now?" She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I thought I had nothing left." She said, "Only my clothes, only pain. But you showed me I had something more." He turned to her. "What's that?" She smiled for real this time. "Worth," she whispered. "I have worth outside." The stars blinked in the sky. A new day was coming, and with it, a new life. She was no longer a number, no longer someone to ignore. She had a name, a voice, a place she had been discarded, broken, and left in the rain. But someone, just one human, had stepped in, and because of that, Lyra was no longer afraid to live. She was worth saving, and now, she would never forget it. The end.